Okay, good morning, everyone. Hope you all can hear me. This is Adrian, and I just wanted to say a huge thank you for taking time out of your very busy day to take part in this webinar. This is our first webinar in a series that we plan to host once a month, and I have to be honest and say I think we've started on a real high. We have three amazing speakers. We have Jane Pendlebury from HOSPA, Kieran Brazil, who's one of the UK's very best revenue managers, and the wonderful Janelle Clark from Snapshot. I'll introduce each speaker before they present, but we'd love to keep this session as interactive as possible. You will have the opportunity to ask questions, and please feel free to log a question on Zoom at any point. We might not get to them all, but we'll try our very best. I'd like to kick off today by introducing Jane Pendlebury. Jane is CEO of HOSPA, which is the Hospitality Professionals Association, and kickstarting her career, she did a degree in hotel management, worked with both Jane and independent hotels, and spent many years assisting hotels with their technology decisions on property management, point of sale, and most of all, revenue management. Jane ended up as a Vice President and General Manager of Agilysys in Europe, ran the membership office at events in HOSPA, and then was promoted to CEO in early 2016. So Jane, it's over to you.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Adrian, and good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for tuning in. So my role today is to set the scene effectively. Janelle and Kieran will follow with their very practical advice on day-to-day revenue management. I'm just sort of looking at the big picture. So my very first point is you've got to have the right person in the place, in the job, to run your revenue management team for you. Now, it's very different depending on the size of your operation. If you're working for one of the big chains, then there's probably a whole team of people supporting you from the head office operation. Or in a smaller, independently run hotel, it might be just one person who's running revenue management whilst they're doing a bit of duty management and everything else that they're doing. But it's just very important to choose the right person. They've got to want to do the job. They've got to have the right experience and knowledge to do the job, and the right attitude. And then you need to train them in revenue management if they haven't already got that training or background, and make sure that they understand your operation, not just maybe where they've come from or textbook revenue management. And going back to my point about in a smaller operation, they may be doing duty management or something as well. You must allow any revenue manager the time to dedicate to revenue management. The bigger the hotel is, the easier this is. But a revenue management can't be a part-time role. It has to be something that people are able to dedicate and understand and spend time working on. And then my third point really on that screen is provide the tools to do the jobs, the tools and the skills. I'm sort of intermingling there. And I'm not just talking about technology, I'll come on to that a little bit later, but it's all about imparting knowledge upwards and downwards throughout the organisation, and just allow debate amongst the whole team, whatever role they're playing in the hotel, the whole management team and everybody that's operating at any level within the hotel. And empower your revenue manager with the confidence to make decisions and support them when taking risks. I know when Janelle speaks, she'll go on to that risk-taking being an element of being a revenue manager. But somebody who's new into the job especially needs a lot of support when taking those risks. And keep up to date. There are lots of courses that you can run out there. There's lots of mentors, Adrian being one of them, that will keep you up to date. But just make sure that you don't sit on your laurels. It's an ever-changing environment out there for revenue management, so it's important to make sure that you're on top of things at all times. And one good way to do that actually is to just network with other revenue management from other hotels, just to speak to them, get their opinion on things. You don't have to go into detail, but just to keep abreast of what's going on. And then within the organisation, it's important to get the culture right, and to regularly review any strategy with the revenue management, with the team, with the general management, with anyone involved in anything commercial with the hotel, and all the other key departmental managers. Total revenue management is very much a buzzword at the moment, and it's no longer just about rooms. We have to look at the whole big picture and get everybody in the hotel involved in revenue management. So my second point there, encourage the whole team to embrace revenue management throughout the hotel. And by team, I'm not talking revenue management, I'm talking about everybody from the general manager right down to a waitress in the restaurant, a room attendant, somebody operating the switchboard, whatever it might be. Everybody needs to understand the culture of revenue management. And a great way to do that is to disseminate through the heads of departments. So if the heads of department are backing the revenue manager, then hopefully they will impass that onto their team. But a commercial and guest-centric attitude from all the hotel staff will enable the revenue manager to flourish. I mentioned earlier that getting the technology right is important, not necessarily revenue management systems, I'll come on to that, but to have the basics in place is more important than anything else, really. To have your website and to make sure it's fully responsive, so not just working when you're sat there at your desk on your PC, but to make sure it is fully responsive on all sorts of mobile devices, including different brands of mobile phones, tablets, and whatever else, because mobile does reign supreme now, and I think it's a lot more than half of all reservations now aren't made from a desktop PC, they're made either from a tablet or a phone, so considerably more than half of your reservations. So make sure that your website is fully responsive and that you make it really easy and quick to book online. Nobody makes it easier to do things than Amazon when you're buying something. So just think about how easy that is and try and make it as easy as possible. And definitely don't ask for any information that you don't need. You don't want to waste their time asking them how they heard about the hotel. That sort of information, hopefully you can gather when they arrive, or via an email if depending on the type of guest that it is. If it's a leisure guest and they're coming for a holiday, they may be give you a lot more time on email before your event, but that's for you to decide. Just make sure the booking process is really simple. And on the website, the information that you've got there about the hotel, it needs to be very clear, concise, with up-to-date information. And again, the quality over quantity rings true very much in that. You need to highlight your unique selling points. If you've got a swimming pool, then tell people you've got a swimming pool. They may not use it, but the fact that you've got a swimming pool might sway their decision, or the fact that you are right in the city centre, or you've got a nice bar, restaurant, whatever it might be. Just make sure that that's really clear to the guests when they're looking at your website. And the language that you're using on your website, presumably most people listening in today will have an English-based website, but do consider your target market. The Chinese market is becoming increasingly important. So is it worth considering having an element of your website available to your Chinese market as well? And don't forget your European visitors. We take it for granted here in the UK that everyone can understand English, and we're very lucky from that point of view, but don't forget that if you get a lot of your business from one particular sector that's not got English as their first language. I did say I would go on to revenue management system. They can be absolutely invaluable. They can also be very expensive. So you just need to keep sight of any return on investment if you are going to invest in a revenue management system. Work out exactly what it's going to cost, how much you're going to generate from it, and how many rooms may be. The simple calculation, very simple ROI would be how many additional rooms do you think you might sell, or higher rates you might sell, and weigh that up against the cost of your revenue management system. And it's not just all down to technology. Technology is there to support the revenue management function in a hotel. Technology alone, despite what some people will tell you, will not revenue manage your hotel. It will certainly give you some great advice, some great tools to help you with your decisions, but that human element is still as crucial as it ever was to getting it right. My next point talks about distribution, which I know is covered a little bit more later in this webinar, but share and manage your inventory very carefully. Use the OTAs to support your sales, and take advantage of any marketing opportunities that they're offering to you. OTAs are great to go to in lean times, but then just make sure you're reviewing it when times are better and you've got demand coming from other channels that maybe are less expensive. then make sure you're not letting the OTAs sell those for you if you can possibly avoid it. Keep regular and close checks on your costs. And it might sound basic, but ensure wherever you're putting information out there that people can make bookings, make it as easy as possible again for those bookings to come into your system. And if it can come in an automated fashion, then all the better. Keep your pricing right. That's easier said than done. I absolutely appreciate that. But value is everything. If your product is worth it, then the people will pay. So be realistic with your pricing. Encourage repeat business where you can, because if people have had a good experience, then they should leave believing that the hotel is good value for money and want to come back and visit you again. Keep a good eye and monitor your competitive set, because that is important, but don't lose sight of your own person. Be your own person. Be prepared to take calculated risks and believe in yourself, but keep an eye, because they may know something you don't. If there's something going on in the local area, perhaps it's passed you by, but somebody else has picked up on it, be that good or bad, but keep an eye. And if they're doing something very strange, maybe just do a little bit of investigation to work out, but don't just copy what they do. Going back to my point on the website, do encourage your guests to book direct. So website is obviously crucially important that they have the tools to enable them to book direct, but do anything else you can to encourage them to book directly with you at the hotel to avoid any commission taking, OTAs where possible. So offer some incentives. Can be anything from free Wi-Fi, including breakfast, or a drink on arrival, or a percentage discount on dinner, whatever it is, but something that sets you apart from the basic offering that anybody online that's not you may be offering to your guests. And where you can, inspire loyalty. A welcome back is great, but make sure your team are aware of who they're welcoming back, make sure they are being welcomed back. But overall, an atmosphere of friendly staff are a much better influence on loyalty than just saying welcome back at that first greeting at the hotel. So get the atmosphere right, and that should encourage rebooking by itself as well. So the revenue manager's job isn't one just of revenue management, it's about making sure the whole team are in line as well. That's why it's such an important role. And my final point really is your online reputation. It is your responsibility as a revenue manager. It's no good blaming the other team if something has gone wrong in the restaurant, or the room wasn't cleaned on time, or whatever it might be. You do have to take that criticism on board and work through that with your colleagues in the hotel. Nothing will drive your rate higher than positive reviews. So make sure wherever you can that you're managing your online reputation by responding to all feedback, by being active online, and making sure that your image, wherever possible, is as good as it possibly can be online. And my very last point, make as much use as you can of your own social media, because the more people see your hotel brand out there, the keener they will be to come and stay with you in your hotel.
Jen, thank you very much. That was amazing, as always. And I know we don't have a lot of time for questions, but I'm also keen to get the other two speakers online. But can I just ask you, a question that came in to me privately just the other day was, what do you think the biggest threat to our industry might be in 2020? Is there anything that you'd like to add to that? I know what my thoughts are, but anything that you think we need to be looking out for next year?
I could do the whole webinar on that alone. I think what we need to look out for is those internet giants, people like Google and Amazon, who know so much about us. How easy is it to go onto Amazon and buy whatever you want to buy? They know who you are because you're logging in from your browser. They've got your purchase details, they've got your history, they've got your payment. You can just click and buy, as people have found out to their detriment when they've been doing it at 2 o'clock in the morning after a night out. It's very, very easy to buy on Amazon. Google know so much about us, all of our history, all of our habits and tools. They are our threat, and it's very important that we keep as much as we can by keeping our relationship direct with the customer and not let those industry giants take over the whole of the hotel hospitality business worldwide. That's the biggest threat.
Well, I think, Jane, you probably find a subject for the next webinar, because I know that a lot of people have opinions on that as well. But thank you so much for that. Next up, we have the wonderful Kieran Brazil, or as he's known in Ireland, Kieran Brazel. And with over 20 years in the industry, Kieran is a hospitality veteran, not that you'd know it from his little young face in that picture, but an Irish native, having recently returned to his homeland. We're very lucky to have him. But Kieran has held senior positions in revenue, sales and e-commerce. I first met Kieran when he worked in the world-renowned Ritz Hotel in London, but he's also held Director of Revenue positions in the 5-star Taj Hotel in London. He's worked internationally and spent time in the Amari Group in Bangkok, and also brings a wealth of experience in the apartment sector as he was Group Revenue Manager for Native Service Apartments in London. He's currently based at the Calishin Hotel, which is in the Irish Midlands and part of the newly formed So Hotels. But Kieran, it's great to have you online with us today, and over to you. Oh, no, maybe we don't have Kieran online. Just bear with me a second.
I was going to try and put on a deep voice with an Irish accent.
No, he was online and listening in perfectly a minute ago. I'll tell you what, actually. Janelle, would you maybe come step in and then we can round off with Kieran? Would that be okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. All right. Oh, is that Kieran online now? No. Okay. We'll fly through Kieran's. Okay, so let's introduce Janelle. Okay, so we've got the amazing and astounding Janelle Clark. Janelle's bio says that she's a revenue professional, educator, but I actually know that she's much more than that. Janelle has a long and very respected career in revenue management and educates in Lausanne, one of the world's top hotel management schools. She's one of our industry's most sought after speakers, and we're thrilled to have her contribute her words of wisdom. So over to you, Janelle.
Oh, thank you very much, Adrian. So I'm going to start by talking about data. One thing we all love as revenue managers is data. We're forecasting, we're setting strategy by understanding the past, analysing the present, and we're doing all of this by looking at the data. Now, there's so much data out there, and I know that for many of us now in hotels, we can get a little bit overwhelmed by all of these different data sources we've got. If you see on the slide here, you can look at all of these internal and external systems that we are collecting data constantly from all different places, the PMS, the POS, the CRM, without all of the other tools, external tools that we use. So my first tip really is to say, oh, we've gone one slide.
Sorry,
no, that's okay.
I beg your pardon.
No problem. My first tip is just to get some order within your data. So focus on the things that are really important to you as a business. So remember that all of that data is out there. Be prepared that not all of it is going to be 100% accurate, but make sure that the things that are really key to you and your business are focused, and things like market segments, your channel codes. Please don't have a market segment that says other. It doesn't mean anything. And when you're using this data to try to analyze and to set your strategy, then having something that isn't clear is not going to help you. So focus on what you really need to know, what's important to your business. If you can't analyze all of this data that you're collecting because it's not in a structured format, or you don't have the tools to use it, or you don't have the time and the resource, something that Jane sort of alluded to earlier, then that data isn't useful to you. So just make sure that you've got the right data for the questions that you need to answer within your business. And that sort of brings me on to the second point, which is don't make the decisions without the data. So you wouldn't just jump off this cliff into that water below without checking a couple of things first. So how deep is it? Where's the current? Is this going to be safe? Where are the jellyfish? So in hotels, we tend to have that mentality where sometimes we make a decision, but then we try and find the data to support or not support the decision. I'm thinking of packages. So, you know, I've worked with a lot of hotels who love setting up special packages because it's something they've always done. Marketing love them. They're convinced they're going to sell. So they spend a lot of time just sitting down together and creating these packages without really looking at the data first. Now, I just have a quick story. I was with a hotel one November in their strategy meeting, and we were discussing the Valentine's package. So we were a few months ahead. We were looking for the following February. And so first of all, we had to decide, you know, what was going to be included in this Valentine's package. Now, this is a country house spa hotel. So it did make sense to create the Valentine's package, absolutely. But then we had to have the meeting. We had the team there. We had to bring chef in, first of all, so he could price the menu. Then we had to bring somebody in from the spa to decide what sort of treatment could be included and what was the cost of that. And there was a huge discussion going on about this Valentine's package. And while that was happening, I happened to look into the PMS and look at the availability for that Valentine's weekend 3 or 4 months ahead. The hotel was completely full. It was closed out for an exclusive use because they had a wedding that weekend. So the last 30 odd minutes that we'd spent trying to come up with a Valentine's package was a complete waste of time. And it's just about understanding, okay, what do we do? You know, let's look at the question first. Let's look at the data and then make the decision. Don't just collect data hoping that we're going to get an answer. We need to have that goal or that question first. So do we need the Valentine's package? Let's look at the data. Yes or no, then we make the decisions. And something to remember about data is that quite often when you start digging in, you'll find there's conflicting answers coming back. You've got different systems that are tracking data in different ways, or there could be just human error. So that's okay, because as revenue managers, and something that Jane mentioned earlier, we are risk takers, and that's good, and you should still be a risk taker. So remember, data doesn't give you the answer, it gives you an answer. So don't try to validate everything that you find. Use your own experience, use your gut feel, use your intuition. That is still so important with the data. But use the data that you've got to help you to make more informed decisions. And that brings me on to my next point, which also Jane mentioned earlier about the technology, the tools that we have. I'm not going to spend too much time talking here, as it is an obvious one. Jane's already mentioned it, but I just felt like it was too important to just not include it. Please make sure your revenue manager has the right tools to do the job. The chef, kitchen, housekeeping, maintenance, they always get what they need, but there seems to be in this industry a reluctance to invest in technology and the right tools that we've got. But if the revenue manager makes a wrong decision, and that's usually because they haven't had enough time to properly analyse trends and results, then that can literally make or break your performance and your results for the next month or 3 months or however long. So this role is becoming, sorry, go back one, Adrian, sorry, you've thrown me off a bit. Right, that's okay. This role is becoming a much more strategic position, and the less time that we spend collating data, bringing it together to then sit down and analyze it, like I just mentioned, all these different data sources that we have. I've worked with so many revenue managers who spend most of their time trying to collect the data from all these different places, and more systems now that we're using that don't integrate. So which is why I've made a point here of automate and integrate. Try to get your systems talking to each other so you don't spend all your time pulling data in from various systems and trying to collate it all into one Excel spreadsheet. There's always going to be Excel in there somewhere. Let's try and get rid of Excel as much as we can. Obviously, we love it. We're revenue managers. But let's try to automate that part of our role so that we have time then to be able to actually look at the analysis to set the strategy. There are some great tools that are being developed, and that takes away some of that boring data collection task. And it allows the revenue managers then to really evolve into these strategic leaders, which is where this role is now moving towards. So integrate wherever you can. Don't get tied in to a stack of technology from one provider who may be very good at creating or developing a PMS, for example, but maybe not so good at developing a booking, a channel manager or a booking engine. So be able to use different systems from different providers, but they must automate, they must integrate. So as much as you can with investing in the right technology, making sure that technology is also integrating.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Jen. I think in a lot of systems, it's really good to have best of breed, but that one provider doesn't always do everything. And it's best to actually choose what is right for your property. And for me, when I'm working with hotels, what I always say to them is, while looking for technology providers, actually document what you want to achieve and then work back from that, so that you know what you want and you choose the best provider. So
absolutely. I was working with a hotel recently. I was actually running a training course, and there was a hotel guy there from a hotel, and we were going back to some of the points Jane mentioned earlier about booking direct and book benefits and really pushing that direct channel. And the guy in one of the delegates on the training course said, my booking engine doesn't do this. I can't put these little messages on. I can't create this urgency. I can't have this marketing on my booking engine. And I said, well, change your booking engine if it's not working for you. And he said, well, it's free though. We got it from our PMS provider, so they gave us a free one. So we won't change it.
Yeah,
so,
well, in my opinion, 0% of nothing is nothing. Better pay for commission and actually get the bookings coming in and converting. So, but again, that's probably a subject for another webinar.
Exactly. So invest in the right technology, automate where you can, and integrate where you can. Okay.
Right. Am I okay? Am I going to be too trigger happy to go on to the next slide?
No, it's fine. Okay, so, and again, this is something that Jane mentioned earlier, get the culture right. So again, it's relating back to that revenue management is the culture. It's not just the job of the revenue manager on their own, but it is the job of the revenue manager to lead that team. And as I mentioned, you know, if we automate more of the boring stuff, this allows us to become the strategist. And also this role now is becoming more recognised as a more leadership role. We are certainly an HOD, we've always been an HOD, but we're now, even in many properties now, the revenue manager or director of revenue is now reporting direct to C-level. So maybe reporting directly into the CEO and bypassing the GM completely. So this is now becoming a very strategic and leadership role. And that means that you as the revenue manager need to brush up on skills, and you need to develop new skills. We still need to be analytical, of course. We still have to have that business acumen, but now communication, I believe, is one of the key skills that we really need to have as a revenue manager. How you communicate the strategy to your team, how you show all those people in the team how valuable they are to the overall strategy and the results, and how you share the vision and get everybody on board.
You know, that actually brings me to a question that I actually got this morning. And I suppose from my point of view, and so some of the stuff that I write has the title that revenue managers should rule the world, and I firmly believe that. Yeah. But how do you actually see that working in practice? How do you, as a working revenue manager and someone who trains in hotels and consults in hotels, how do you get those teams to actually come together, work together, and understand the importance of revenue management through every department? How do you get that culture? How do you start changing that culture?
That's a good question. I think communication, as I've mentioned here, communication. So that starts with your obvious regular meetings. And that's not just your revenue strategy meeting with your GM and your FC and your sales people. This is about having departmental meetings. It's about you as the revenue manager going and speaking to the members of the other departments to explain, like I say, how do they How do they add to your strategy? How are they involved? So let's use TripAdvisor as an example. So what do people say about the hotel on TripAdvisor? Jane mentioned earlier, you know, revenue management now, these people do have a part to play in the results that we have. We know that there are direct correlations now between what people say about us and the reviews and the rankings to the prices that we can charge and how much people are prepared to pay, and will still see value if they're getting great service. So that means the service they're getting from housekeeping, that means the service they're getting from the bar staff, that means the service they're getting from the breakfast server. And all of these people need to understand that what they are doing is part of the success of the hotel. And yes, operations and service and guest service, we know that you know, they're told constantly, hopefully, that they're playing a great part in that. But then how does that relate to money? And when we're making that more profit, how are we spending that profit? So can we say to the staff, yes, we're going to put this target here. If we achieve whatever it is, we're going to invest X amount back into the property. That will mean that we have better staff incentives. That will mean we have better new uniforms. That will mean that we can have a staff night out bowling, whatever it is. But being able to let the team understand where they fit in to this culture, and it's where they fit into the results, and keeping people informed. And that's where it's this this communication that I think is absolutely key to making sure that they all understand how important they are. You're not the revenue manager making a decision in a back office on an Excel spreadsheet, press the button and the rate goes out and that's the end of it. But those days are gone. You are now someone that is running a business and driving a business forward, and needs to have that support of all the people around you, the other HODs, but right the way through to the people that are particularly those that are guest facing. Does that help?
Yeah, completely agree, Jim, because I think revenue management is the start of the process, but we have to remember that the end goal is making the customer happy.
Absolutely.
And I think if we have the rate strategy right, the distribution right, then all the other departments need to come on board to support us through that whole customer journey, right through to the customer, you know, checking in and leaving. So no, that's brilliant advice. I'm going to, if you don't mind, just hop back through your slides, because I think we may have Kieran on board now. Now, I'm not going to introduce him again because he's already milked that one.
Can you hear me now?
What is it? Luxembourg, we can hear you.
I tell you, good. Firstly, please accept my apologies. I had to say technical issues on this side. And thanks very much, Adrian and Janelle, for jumping in there. Appreciate it. Okay, so
let me just
ready to kick off whenever you are, Adrian.
Yes, perfect. Thanks, Kieran.
Excellent. There we go. So the first topic I'd like to talk, two topics to talk about today, and the first of those being TrevPAR. If I'm being totally honest, TrevPAR is a word that up to maybe 3-4 years ago, I just thought was on the buzzwords that was being floated about, and which often happens, I think, in our industry, and then suddenly we have to start taking a look at it more seriously. So as you can see there, obviously, it's looking at the simple way of doing this, dividing your total net revenues of your property by the total available rooms. Okay, go on to the next one there, Adrian. I'll talk it through. So I think it's easier, obviously, if we look at it as an example. So the whole idea really behind it is taking a look at the total revenue of your property and making sure that when you're making, if your hotel, for example, is primarily rooms, but you have a reasonably strong food and beverage meetings offering, that you're taking that into account, because obviously sometimes in revenue we can be a little bit tunnel vision and blinkered in terms of as long as we get the rooms filled, as long as we get the occupancy right, without taking in the correct considerations for the rest of the business. And that's where the change in landscape is definitely happening within revenue management. So if we look at the example here, so which I took from line, so the TrevPAR for June for this hotel was 125, F&B sales at 225,000, totaling 350. And if you divide it by the number of available rooms, it comes to 116. on the flip side, where maybe there was a choice taken to take a stronger ADR group piece of business and brought it in at 165, but they were not having any spend within the hotel, and they were going out for the day and not having additional spend, the effect here is that the F&B sales suffered accordingly, with the total being 340. Therefore, as it worked out, $90.67. So it's just basically having more holistic approach to how we are doing things.
Kieran, can I maybe jump in and ask you one question that we've just got through there, and I think it's really interesting because, sorry, I had put out online what everyone was going to be covering today. I've just had a question about TrevPAR. If you were doing this operationally in a hotel, would you break that down by market segment? With that, you know, so you could actually see, let's say as an example, what your revenue was for the month for corporates, what they were spending versus your leisure segment or your wedding segment or whatever it is. Would you actually do that in a working environment?
In a working environment, yes, I would do that, just because it gives you a better understanding of your market segment. So if you're looking at specifics, let's say for the corporate market, and you're looking at what their additional spends, their additional revenue streams into the hotel are, it's a good way when you're looking at it clearly in terms of when it comes to renegotiation, when it comes to, you know, the RFP season, you know, okay, well, this is what they bring additionally to the hotel. So you're looking at the whole and total revenue as opposed to just the room nights that they're going to account for. I mean, every business is different, obviously, and it depends. Sometimes it depends on the resources that you have on site to drill down to that level. But if you can, I would definitely advise to look at that, because it just gives you, it goes back to, I think, some of the points that Jane and Janelle were saying. It gives you the knowledge and the time in terms of when you're making decisions, taking that time to look at this information before you make strategic decisions. You know, it helps you to make smarter moves, I would say.
Perfect. Thanks, Kieran.
No worries. So I think, as I was saying, kind of part of why we would focus on this is you know, again, I spoke there just about the changing landscapes and the creative that we keep in tune with our customer needs, and basically to make sure that we're competitive. Like these days, the way we combine technology now, it means that the smarter ways of offering different services to our guests, even down starting at the simple things like the add-ons through your website, the different links, the WeChat, the interactive element in which we're able to now communicate with our guests. So I think for us, and you know, it's making sure that we're on top of that, making sure that, again, I'm falling in line with what the speakers before me said in terms of, you know, making sure that we're up to date with our technology, making sure it's fresh, the content's fresh. Okay, so I think just on your first thing first, so doing the splits, and obviously I don't mean that literally. We do many things as revenue managers. That thankfully is not.
You're not that flexible, Kieran.
Not that flexible yet, I'm afraid. So again, it's just being realistic when you're looking at them. So if you're looking at your hotel, looking at the revenue that comes in, if 90% of your total revenue is from your rooms, obviously that's the area that you do it. So it's being realistic in terms of your business. RevPAR is definitely not something that's become obsolete in any way, but it's taking that full picture, taking a look at how it contributes to your business from the top and bottom line, and making that decision of what your focus is going to be. So I'll just give you a slide, just an example here. So this is it's actually a Hotset slide from the European market in 2018. So it shows in Europe that 66.2% still comes from our revenue, from our room revenue. Food and beverage comes in at 28.7%, and sorry, Janelle, that other revenue, which has gone down to 5.2%. But I think we know that our phone calls different, you know, spas, leisure, etc. Okay. So again, you know, it ties in nicely. So the key thing is, in terms of your people and your technology, is incentivize and empower your teams. In our industry, if you have a front desk team, we have to be realistic about what a receptionist or, you know, reservations agent earn, and to keep staff is a big issue in hotels. So if you have ways of empowering that member of staff to make them feel part of the hotel, if you can incentivize them, it's a very, you know, it plays a very strong card for you in terms of keeping staff and keeping that stability within your team. Upselling at the front desk, there's many different programs and organizations that you can take on board in terms of that. So that you can, but I know in various hotels I've worked in kind of through my career, we've used companies, for example, like TSA, and had very successful upselling schemes because they're structured, because these guys come back in, they retrain. So it means that the teams are constantly available to, on their guard in terms of ready to upsell at any given time. And that comes down to also good planning, choosing your arrivals correctly on the day. And that's a way of increasing it. Cross-selling in terms of additional breakfasts. If people are on room-only rates and you've got space available in the restaurant. Very simple example, but it can be very effective. Just offer them a slightly discounted rate on the day, and boom, that's a way of increasing your revenue streams. Same with the restaurant, and same with the food and beverage staff in general. It's amazing the amount of properties you go into where we need to fine tune there in terms of the staff and give them the opportunity to upsell and give them the chance to incentivize them as well. So they can obviously put a few more pence in their pocket, and that tends to work for everybody. And digital add-ons, it's okay. I think I've already covered that one anyway. So the second topic I went on to, sorry, I'm hopping on a little bit, is corporate rates. Again, it's something that, again, has changed dynamically within the last kind of 5 to 10 years. It's been kind of gearing a little bit towards having more flexible corporate rates in terms of your seasonal pricing. I know for me in London, as an example, January, when I was there, January, February, March, we would have seasonal prices out on the OTAs, which would sometimes come in under the corporate rates available. The challenge then is what you're finding is your corporates are going directly to the OTAs. You're paying anything between 15 and 20% to acquire that booking for you, and the corporate booker is starting to lose their faith and their loyalty within the person that they've set up an agreed program with. If you make the choice then to be flexible with that pricing and be realistic with it, and give them, so from January to March, an example, give them the lower rate that you know is going to go out to the public market and offer them that during that time. What you're finding is that you're not going to dilute your ADR. Your bottom line costs are going to be, like, the dramatic saving is sometimes up to 10% in terms of depending on your cost per acquisition for each of those bookings. And, and the third point is the transparency with your client or your corporate booker on that means it's going to build more trust and thankfully more loyalty as well. So to kind of sum it up, the first things first, so the relationship here is key in terms of your corporate bookers. One thing I just wanted to point out, I know sometimes between sales and revenue, you have that issue that, oh, the revenue manager won't allow me to offer that rate, and there's a little bit of good cop, bad cop. I think hotels should actually avoid going into that area. We want to become a united front. In the same way we answer the online reviews and represent the hotel, we should do that as a company as well as hotels. Be realistic with the pricing. Like I mentioned, make sure there's no point in offering £5 or £10 off their normal corporate rate during that period if you know you're going to offer 20 or 30 below. It's not going to help you. They're still going to go through the OTA, they're still going to go through the other channels to book, and it's going to cost you more. Transparency, again, kind of ties in with that, just being open with them, explaining the reasons why you're offering the corporate pricing for this rate at this time. And again, it comes down to, I'm going to cover the points that the ladies covered as well, the awareness. Come out of the little revenue box, if you like, depending on what your setup is, and make sure you're communicating all this with your teams and make them understand the reasons and help them to understand the reasons why you're doing it as well.
Kieran, can I actually ask you a question? And this is from me rather than anyone that's come in, because I think it's quite interesting. We've heard a lot over the last few years about giving your corporates a dynamic bar, so 5% off your bar rate or 10% off your bar rate. I know back in my days when I worked in Hilton, we tried it, but that was sort of 20 years ago and it didn't really work. I just wondered, through all of your experience and especially your experience in the international market, did you ever find that worked well for you?
If I'm honest with you, my experience, it had quite a mixed review. If I've worked in situations with hotels where if we knew they could only produce less than 50 room nights per year, this was the option that we gave them. We gave them the access to have a rate that was 5 or 10% discounted off bar. I think from my perspective, where you're looking at the bigger contracts, so if you have like a contract that's producing 500, 1,000 nights plus per year, then what I would say is that that's where you really need to look at that seasonal pricing carefully and make sure that you're completing those RFP seasons in line with your overall strategy for the year, because that has the ability to really damage your business. In all honesty, would I say it's massively successful to offer them? I think it's a nice thing to be able to offer them, but in my experience, the pickup from just offering the slight discount off bar, it's not a huge uptake on that.
Okay. And one question that actually has been sent in for you, Kieran, and I'm not putting you on the spot, but the question is, what do you feel the future is for our revenue managers? What do you think the role is going to be? So if someone was coming into the industry now at this point, where do you see that career progression going for them?
I think some of the key things I would say is it's a much more commercial position now in revenue. There was a point in revenue where you just needed to understand your figures. You were very much the gatekeeper. You got the right rates in. And I think now you have to look at the bigger picture. You're looking at the different channels. You're looking at one of the things if I'm honest, like 10 years ago, I didn't have a strong understanding of was the marketing, the online side, the complete cost per acquisition. Because sometimes in the GM world, forgive me if there's GMs on the line, there used to be this thing of, oh, but it's coming directly, it's coming through our website, so that's costing us nothing. So it's understanding those costs and understanding the general market and being out there, I would say as well, in terms of, understanding your team's position, communicating that information with your team. So I think the word I would probably use, and I've used it earlier, is holistic. I think there has to be a much more holistic approach to your business as a whole, and it's moving away from just that sole rooms focus.
Okay, well, we've got one very final quick question, and I won't put you on the spot. I just wondered if anyone else wanted to pick this up. We've got a question from Amanda. Actually, we've got about 20 questions here, but I'm just going to pick Amanda's. What is your opinion of the importance of GOP, so gross operating profit, in the revenue role? Does anyone want to pick that up? Do you want to stay with you?
No, well, I think it's probably just leading on from what Kieran was just saying about the revenue manager now has to be so much more commercially aware. And it's not, we've moved on from the yield manager who yielded inventory and changed the price. Now you have to really understand the profitability of the revenue that you're driving. So the cost at every level. So even when, like Kieran's been mentioning TrevPar, the next step is GoPar, right? So, it's really understanding exactly, and again, as Kieran's already said, with the marketing, how much does it cost us to get that person to our website, to convert them on the website? It's not a free customer. And as long as we're spending less in the marketing budget to get them there and convert them than we would be spending on commissions, then we're still winning. But if we don't understand all those costs, then how do we know if we're making the right decision? So I would say that it's profitability that is our key now. So we are profit managers now rather than revenue managers. It's too easy to fill the hotel, drive that revenue, but without looking at those costs.
Yeah, I completely agree. And Janelle, I'm sure you're the same in your consultancy role. Still, sort of 16 years after I started doing this job, I'm still shocked at how many hotels don't understand the cost of having an occupied room. So I think there's, we still have a bit to go, but isn't that exciting that we still have a bit to go?
Yeah, and I think the question earlier about where does this role go, I think for us, I totally agree that revenue managers should rule the world. And the good news for anyone listening who's thinking about becoming a revenue manager or who is a revenue manager, there is such a shortage of good revenue managers in the industry, and everyone wants one now. 10 years ago, not everyone wanted a revenue manager or recognized what they did. Now everyone wants one, and there aren't enough out there. So this is a fantastic path to take. It's a great time to become a revenue manager. So yeah, get the skills that you need. Go and learn those extra. There's still training. Obviously there's training in revenue management, but things like marketing, the commercial side, go and get those skills, and really the world's your oyster.
I think actually it's a good point to maybe plug some of the courses that HOSPA run, Jane, and I'm sure that Jane would be very open to taking any questions about those revenue management conversations after the webinar, and I'm very happy to field any inquiries through to Jane if anyone has that. But honestly, guys, that was a great way to end, Janelle. I'm actually shocked. Time has flown by so quickly. We've had nearly 50 minutes of content, some great speakers, and hopefully everyone who's dialed in today has had something useful to take away. It only leaves me just to say thank you to all our attendees. We had 111 in total, and if any of you picked up the sort of pre-marketing on this webinar, you'll know that Right Revenue tries to be ethical in everything that we do, and so for every attendee that signed on today, we are going to donate £1 to our charity this year, which is Lend with Care. That charity supports startup businesses in developing countries by lending them money, which is then repaid back into the system and helps other startups. So that will happen today. And a huge thank you to our speakers, Jane, Kieran and Janelle. You were all amazing. I hope everyone can join us for our next webinar, which happens on the 8th of October. And it's entitled Is Book Direct Dead? The Great Debate, OTAs versus Direct. I hope you can all join us for that. But thanks very much, everyone. That was great. I really enjoyed it. Hope you did too. And thanks for everything.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.